All right, that brings us to the program for tonight. For our program tonight, Bella Vista Radio Club welcomes member Scott Branyan, Whiskey 5 Alpha Alpha Juliet, to explain this new and fascinating mode and how to use it successfully to make DX contacts. Scott's program will be very informative and beneficial to present and future newcomers to the HF bands, as well as possibly shedding some new light on FT8 operating techniques for FT8 veteran operators. Although Scott is still relatively new to the hobby, he has learned HF operation very quickly and is a juggernaut on the HF bands and working DX. Since he started just 3.5 years ago, his current ADXA, Arkansas DX Association numbers show him with a total of 217 countries confirmed, 214 of those on FT8. That's incredible. So it is quite evident that he has become accustomed to and knows how to operate this exciting mode. And Scott, we welcome you and look forward to your presentation. Give it a...
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Tom and Don, for organizing and planning and then the invitation to come and speak. I'm going to refer to notes because I can't put this over here. So, and it's great to get back to a meeting after 2 years. It's been 2 years since I've come to a meeting, and I don't know if y'all missed out that much time or not, but it's great to be back, and hopefully we'll be able to come some more. Congratulations, Don, on your retirement. I think he left the room. But it's been great to see him on the FT8 bands. Oh, there he is.
You're a roving reporter.
Yeah. And this spring, during the height of the good propagation we had, well, that was fun to see you working so much on the bands on FT8. I do have to correct something that you said in the newsletter about me. However, you said something like I was a juggernaut DX op. And I looked up that word juggernaut. I have to refer to it here. And according to Webster's, it's a massive, inexorable force, campaign, movement, or object that crushes whatever is in its path. Now, the Brits use that term juggernaut in terms when they wanted to refer to a large, heavy truck. We would say a Mack truck. So that's, I guess that's a compliment. Thank you for that. But I remember that this spring, during some DXing and waiting for a station that I needed to become strong enough to contact, I was waiting for the propagation to come up and catch him at his peak, and I thought, and he peaked at his signal strength, and I said, boy, I'm going to call to him, and I'm going to get him now. And sure enough, I came back with a signal report plus 00 decibels, which for a DX station to give someone in Arkansas, that's a pretty good signal report. So it said double-aught decibel to K5 dB. And so Don, I thought we were friends, but the thing that really hurt was that after you finished your call, his signal dropped off and I didn't have another chance to get him. So anyway, so I think everyone in the room now knows the true story on who the juggernaut is in the DX operation world. So anyway, it's fun to be here and to look at what our radio sport opportunities are. And don't let anyone kid you. It is a radio sport, and there's a lot of camaraderie around it, and a lot of joking, and but some serious attempts to earn awards and achieve achieve things. And I think whoever came up with the idea of the radio sport and the people that organized these awards over the years have they made it and ensured that it was a never-ending pursuit. Because I mean, you get to one level and you think, oh, I've achieved something, and then you look and there's all these other awards to go after. Let's look at the traditional pathways, or the pathways to DX, and these include traditional pathways, which we know to be phone, SSB, continuous wave, or CW, Morse code, and perhaps RIDI, if you were fortunate enough to get into the RIDI thing. Jay tells me that he's tried to encourage me to check into it and get started in it, but he says there's a little bit of a learning curve to it, right, Jay?
RIDI?
On RIDI?
No, you can
No?
handle it.
Okay.
You do FT8, you're right. You should be.
All right. All right. You just scared me a little bit. You talked about making a RIDI contact the other night and had an hour-long conversation.
Yeah, on 20 meters.
Wow. That's amazing. So those were the traditional pathways to DX and an award. In 2001, Joe Taylor, the famed physicist, and wasn't he a Nobel Prize winner? K1JT. I've only seen his call sign one time on the air, and I saw it, and I started to call him, and he disappeared. He went off the air. So I missed my opportunity. But he introduced software. He wrote a software package called WSJT for Joe Taylor in 2001. And WSJTX was introduced in 2005. And along the way, over the years, he has built this software package to introduce new digital modes that he added from time to time. And FT8, which was a new frequency shift keying mode, was added in 2017. So that's not that long ago. I became a ham in 2019. So FT8 was very new then, and it was perfect for weak signals and with a narrow bandwidth of just 50 hertz. FT4 was introduced in 2019, and it was a little wider signal, but twice as fast on the time sequence. So frustrated hams operating at the bottom of the sunspot cycle soon gave it a favorable reception, and shortly after, ARRL began awarding credits towards DXCC with the modes, and this has made them very popular. So really, I became a ham at an opportune time to get in on the FT8 trend, because the sunspot cycle was low and the mode was very new. I can remember getting on bands looking for FT8 contacts, and a lot of times there were not very many. And nowadays you get on the band and you get on 20 at night or 40, and it's just lit up orange all the way across the spectrum on the widescreen. So it's really has been a boon, I think, to maybe a certain segment of people who want to operate in the digital mode. But I've also seen, looking up ham calls that I've made contact with, that a lot of operators are veteran phone and CW operators, but they're getting older and they wanted something maybe a little easier and something they didn't have to work at quite so hard, and they're enjoying the FT8 stuff. So these are the things you can do on FT8 and 4. You can chase DX and towards DXCC, worked all continents, and CQ worked all zone awards. You can work US stations for worked all states 5-band awards, SOTA and POTA you can do. Do you do much on FT8 in your?
I don't. In fact, that's what I'm learning tonight.
Okay, great. Grids, you can chase VUCC. I just obtained, just last week, my VUCC award from all the good propagation I had this spring, and had a 6-meter wire in the air. So I actually had trouble setting up the rules in Logbook of the World to get the credits. I contacted Logbook of the World through email, and they basically set it up for me. And then I turned around and I looked, and I had 121 credits, so I applied for the award. Counties, Don, is that right? You can do CQ USA counties on FT8? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then contests, but this is limited mostly to VHF FT8.
Scott, you do know the ARRL now has got a new FTA contest only.
I heard something about it, but I know nothing about it yet.
That's
So
what they do now.
okay.
They have officially sanctioned a FTX only contest. I forget when it is, but it's be the first time.
It will be once a year, twice a year, or once a year? Okay. So let's laugh a little bit and go on with the memes here. Isn't that a sad looking, that's the saddest looking dog I think I've ever seen, that little, is that a pug? You can read this, interpret this however you want. You can look at it from signal, strength, or bandwidth, or esteem in the eyes of hams. But you can just see the SSB is known for having a very broad bandwidth and a large signal. CW, smaller bandwidth, 500 kilowatts if you have the filter, and maybe not requiring as much power. And FT8, the weakest signal I've ever decoded on my computer at home was either a minus 26 or a minus 28 decibel. So at that level, I don't think I even saw the station on the widescreen, on the visual pan adapter representation. He just appeared in the band activity window, but I never saw him coming. So that was interesting. This is a great meme. I hate FT8. It requires no skill and isn't even a real QSO. So much different than my tower, Yagi, and amp, so I can give the guy a location and a 5.9 before I say 73. So I'd like to know, that guy's obviously, this is obviously a stock photo, and that guy is a model. I'd like to know what he earned for that photo. And then, okay, I get it. CW is for men. This is a rich meme here. Obviously a field day. Everybody having fun and active and engaged, except for poor old Bernie there sitting isolated at his FT8 station. And this is probably my favorite mode meme here. See no evil, hear no evil, or hear no evil, see no evil, and speak no evil. CW, Digimodes, and SSB. This is kind of my story. I took the red pill, and I've been going down finding that deep rabbit hole, and it does go deep. The HF world is to me, well, I found the VHF, UHF world very proprietary. Every club has a repeater, right? In the HF world, you run across some free spirits, a lot of free spirits. And and it's worldwide. And so you're learning. When I was in school in third, fourth grade, I remember geography and social studies, and I remember how much I enjoyed that. And I'm finding this is kind of a return to that enjoyment of learning about different cultures and where people live, and getting to travel the world on the airwaves. And I hear friends going to some remote exotic place, and I say, I've been there. I've been there on the airwaves. So that's the introduction. Let's talk about the setup and knowing your radio, the settings that are important. We're not obviously going to take time to talk about installing WSJTX software and all the problems and issues you run into with that, but you need to read the manual, and you need to read the separate operating tips doc, and you need to keep your radio manual handy because there will be some issues. But assuming everything's working fine and you're able to make contacts, you need to turn that setting on that automatic gun control, automatic gain control. You need to turn that to fast. This makes it more sensitive, and so it's able to pick up those signals better. And then if you have any optional filters on, such as preamp or noise reduction, you need to turn those off. And then power requirements are going to vary. That's all going to depend on your QTH. I live on a ridge at 1,320 feet. That's the same elevation as Rogers Airport. And that's pretty much a flat plane through there. So I get good takeoffs, and I've got some hollers on the south of me and the north of me. And so I've got a good location for a DX. So your mileage will vary on your location. Your antenna system and your gain that you're able to get is going to determine your power requirements. I run barefoot, so just nothing more than 100 watts. When I first started working DX, mostly a lot of European and Caribbean stations, I worked a lot on 25 to 50 watts. But as I started reaching out and looking at antipodal stations on the backside of the globe, you know, India and Asia and China and you know, wherever, I found I had to bump that up to 95 watts to make a contact, to get back where the guy could read me, hear my signal. And then be on the lookout for quirks that are peculiar to your radio model. On mine, on the ICOM 7100, I found out it retains the last split setting when turning on the Fox and Hound split in WSJTX. So if I've been working CW split, let's say, on a band, and I decide to go over to FT8, I've run into issues where if I was in CW mode, it remembers this, and so when you go to FT8, the transmit mode and frequency is still on that frequency in that CW band and in CW mode. So I've got to manually remember to push that button to push split off and turn it back on in order to reset it so that it's got FT8 USB mode, and then it'll transmit. But I can't tell you how many times I've gone to working a DX station on FT8 after doing that, and then calling, and I finally look at the power meter and nothing's going out. So, you know, you'll find quirky things like that on every radio. Every radio is different. let's talk call sequence. And by the way, this is kind of fine print. Can everyone see okay? Read the screen okay? So this is the full call sequence in FT8. You've got, does this have a laser pointer? Ah, how about that? Oh, okay. So when you call CQ, the normal sequence is someone calls you back and gives you their grid square, and then you return their call with a signal report. They send you a signal report, and then you send them a Roger, 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 or received, report received, Roger. And then they send you a 73, and you send them a 73. And that's, you don't count the first CQ, because once you throw a CQ out, if there's a lot of band activity, you may get calls just coming in one after the other, and you don't have to call CQ again. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at 15 seconds. That's the intervals, the cycle interval on FT8. And so that's about 1.5 minutes for that completed sequence. In DXing, there's a shortened sequence that people use. And you can see instead of Roger, 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 you send a Roger, Roger 73, and then you only expect the contacting station to send you a 73. When you put this in the RR73 mode option, when you send that, it logs the call on your end. Okay, so I'll explain a little bit more about what that RR73 means here in just a couple of slides further along. So this is even a further shortened sequence. By the way, the shortened sequence is often used in DX, but I see it being used more all the time, continuously, by even stations working in the States, working one another in the States. And I actually leave mine set on this setting all the time. So if I contact the person and the person sends me an RR70 or an RRR, then the software knows to send to the 73, and then he'll send you back a 73. So the software adjusts. But let's say you've got bad QRM or QRN, and a lot of interference, or you've got QSB that's just rapid fast, that the signal's strong for a little bit and then it drops out, and it cycles faster than your call completion. We're using a full call. So I learned this from watching Japanese ham operators, because I would be contacting a DX station, and then when I was done, when I sent a 73, they would slip me a signal report. And then I would come back to them with a signal report, and then I would get an RR73, and that was the completion of the call. So Japanese ham operators are very, very good. They're very astute, and they're very on their toes. They just they've been doing this, and I guess is Japan has the most number of hams, I think, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's no location in that sequence. There's no grid square.
No, that's right. On this one, there's no grid square. You'd have to look it up on QRZ, or sometimes if you have it, I can't remember if WSJTX will log it if you have it plugged into your settings. It may log it. I can't remember for sure. So if you don't need a grid square, or if you just need to take the time to look it up, I find that grid squares are kind of a nifty thing anyway, because someone will list a grid square on their QRZ page, and it's not right because they're in the second location or a third location, and then you have to go by the grid square that comes back on the LOTW report, right? I mean, that's the official grid square, no matter what the QRZ page says. So here's an example of the very thing. So here's a station WM8Q. I think I had worked him on 2 bands on 10 meters and 12 meters a few days before. And I see him, and he's calling WI9, that would be Wisconsin or somewhere up north. And then he's working, he calls him 3 times, gets nothing or sends nothing. Then he works Argentina, Lima United. And then he works NE1, so that'd be New England area. And so he's not getting, I don't see him getting anything, and so I slip him a signal report. And he comes back with a good signal report for me, plus 07. And I send him an RR73, and then he goes back to trying to get DX, Spain, EA1. So it's just a good way to slip in a call that you don't want to, if the guy's chasing DX, you don't want to really interrupt his rhythm. But this takes so little effort. If he's not being successful, you know, what's it going to hurt to slip him a signal report and see if he comes back to you?
How did you do that? The little buttons, how did you go past? Okay, that is it.
Yeah, you do the button down here, so it's on the first signal report. Yep, yep, and then the software automatically knows what to do.
I didn't know what it was.
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Interesting.
So today's tip is RR73 means goodbye, that's all, regards, or I'm out, and no reply is expected, so none is sent. But I always log calls after sending or receiving RR73. However, even when a DX sends me an RR73, some DX stations expect a 73 in return from you, and they will not log the call without it. So, you know, cover your bases. Use that method if it works, but you know, it doesn't hurt to send them a 73, and especially if it means making the log or not. Let's talk about workflow, how to use FT8 in making DX contacts. What I do is I go through first, and when I first turn on the radio, and I'll scan the bands. And so here's your FT8 call frequencies and FT4. And what I'll do is I'll pick the FT8 standard frequencies first, and I may work up or I may work down the bands. But I'll go to these frequencies and just listen and see if anything's active on those frequencies. So I'll start with 80 meters and then start going up. 40 meters, I don't have 30 meters available right now, so 20 meters and on up to 6 meters. And then I'm listening for, you know, a DX station that I need. And hopefully one with a good signal and before he's been spotted. And then I'll slip over to either FT8 common DX or Fox and Hound frequencies, or I'll slip over to FT4 and I'll do the same thing. I'll work down the bands or up the bands, and then I'll do the other. And then that way you're covering your bases just to know what's out there and what's available. You may find dead bands. Right now in the evenings, 10s and 12s aren't doing very good, are they, Jay? So we had excellent conditions here and 6 meters, weeks ago, but now nothing. And so, I'll listen and I'll watch the graph, and I'll watch for 1 or 2 call cycles, and then I'm out of there. I'm checking in another band.
On you're switching from one band to the other, you do that automatically? Do you have to set it up on a
You can do it in software. So,
That's what I'm getting at.
yeah. So right here is your band selector. And when you click on that and it drops down, it has those frequencies listed depending on the mode that you're in. See, this is FT8. And then up here where it says mode, you click on that and you can change to FT4. And then the common DX and Fox and Hound frequencies that are FT8, these will often change from D-expedition to D-expedition. So one group like Wallace, Futuna Island may prefer one group of frequencies to work, and someone else may choose another. But they kind of get repeated from time to time. So this is kind of the ones that are a good bet to check. But if you're chasing a rare station or an all-time new one for you, it pays to go to the station's QRZ page and see what their operating procedures are. A lot of times they'll give a band plan and describe what frequencies they're going to be operating on. So when you start working contacts, you always want to work split. That means you're transmitting and you're receiving on different frequencies. The reason for this is because if you go and you work, if everybody worked the same frequency that the DX was calling on, there's just going to be a massive amount of QRM. And if someone happens to get the wrong timing sequence, like I was trying to contact Japan on 6 meters a few weeks ago in the evening. They were really strong. They were coming in. I saw Jay working Japan. I saw others working Japan, but I wasn't able to make connection. And Steve Norris over at Eureka Springs, W5KI, sent me a text on JT Alert, which is a software add-on program. And he said, if you're trying to contact Japan, you're on the wrong sequence. So I had to slip over to the other can't describe it right now. The other, you're working offset, odd and even timing. Imagine the clock, 60 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 45. So offset would be 15 and 45 seconds. That would be, if you click the box for odd or offset, you're going to be calling and working on that. The other station's going to be working on even, which would be top of the second, top of the minute and bottom of the minute. So if you're calling at the same time, he's not going to hear you. So you have to make sure you're offset just right so that, and when you click on his call sign in the software package, it automatically sets that and adjusts it for you. The only issue is if you're just setting up to call CQ and you're not paying attention to the stations that you're working, what their offset is. Does that make sense? So work split, use the propagation when it's in your favor. It's amazing to watch the propagation. Propagation tends to go, for us, it tends to go from east to west. So in the morning, you're working Europe. Later in the afternoon and the evening, you can see that propagation. You can watch the DX stations, for example, in Africa. They'll start working the East Coast. They'll work 3s and 4s W3s, W4s. And then they'll slowly start getting close to the Midwest and start picking up Ohio and Wisconsin, and then lo and behold, Texas and Louisiana and Arkansas. And once they start getting into that region, you know your propagation is peaking, and that's one of the best times to try to work them. Just notice who the DX is calling. If they're calling, if they're working and every station is Asia or Japan, then you know propagation's probably not in your favor. If they're working Asia, you know. But if every now and then you'll see them work a state, and that state is close to a W5 area, then it might be worth giving a call, giving a try. Call selectively, hunt and seek. Now, when you're first starting out and your ward's slot is open, you need everything, then this doesn't apply so much. You're just calling anybody, and everyone that comes back to you is like a new DX contact. But as you start to get, I'm over 200 DX stations now, entities or countries, and so as it starts to get more difficult, and it does start to get more difficult, you have to really not get distracted and go after the ones you need. So you're not calling willy-nilly, you're targeting, and you're looking, the spotting helps, and you're trying to pinpoint where they are and the good conditions so that you can make contact with them. So watch for special signs in the DX station, from the DX station, such as QSY, frequency, fox and hound. So what often happens with a DX station is they'll go to the main frequencies for FT8, like on 20 meters, you can see it's 14074. And since everybody tends to congregate there, they'll start there. And as they start to build interest, and they start to generate a lot of activity, people trying to call them, they'll slip in this message as a special message on their frequency line that says QSY, or relocate to frequency, let's say 18, let's see, what's the one I've got here for common DX frequency? For
15095.
Yeah, 14090 for 20 meters, 14090, let's say. QSY 14, or they just may say 9.90 or 90, assuming that you know they're on 20 meters, so it's going to be 14.090. And then they'll specify fox and hound. That means they've got a lot of calls and contacts coming, and so they anticipate trying to work a big crew or a big crowd. And so when you change over to 14090, you need to go into your settings and you need to adjust to fox and hound mode, and we'll talk about that shortly. Learn to deal with a QRM. That can be a real frustrating thing. Sometimes in the evenings, especially on 20 meters, it's just so crowded, and people are working on top of one another 4 or 5 deep on the same frequency or near the same frequency. And so it really becomes difficult to pull out those calls. So filters help. Directional antennas or beams help, but sometimes there's not anything you can really do about it, especially if you get strong interfering stateside stations close by us. Like I was trying to work an Africa station, and there was a fellow in Springfield, Missouri, that was working on the African station's offset time. Okay, so he wasn't really interfering with the DX station, but he was calling CQ. And so everyone that was coming back to him was over the top of the DX station on his time. And so, and they were all strong signals. So I waited for an hour or an hour and a half to see if the guy would go away, and he never did. So that evening was just a loss. So it can be a real frustrating thing. And when that starts happening, you know, sometimes you just got to turn the radio off or go do something else, or just go to another band and work something easier. You know, whatever you need to do to take a break. And then don't forget to log your QSOs. If you're chasing awards, you have to have them in the log. And then QSLing, there are several possible routes for QSO confirmation. Digital includes Logbook of the World, QRZ, and EQSL. There's OQRS, which are proprietary services. These are often run by QSL managers, and they have a payment system where you pay them, and you don't have to send them a card. It's all digital. You fill in the time and the date, or the QSO and the band that you worked them on, and then pay whatever their request is, and then they will send you a card. And some of them will send you a card and log it on Logbook of the World at the same time. Club Log is it's a very popular version of OQRS, which stands for Online QSL Request Service. Cards, you can go direct. This can take a couple of weeks to 6 months or longer to get a card back. A bureau, this can take a few weeks to forever. You hear stories of cards taking years to receive, but sometimes that's true of digital confirmations too. My Elmer got a confirmation on Logbook of the World for a QSO that he made 10 years ago. So he's assuming that the guy decided, well, I guess I might get on Logbook of the World. But he did get the confirm. And then PayPal, usually it's quick, 2 to 4 weeks or so. So check to see if the station has a log online and see if you are in it before making a request. And then follow the op or the QSL manager's instructions. And payment requests vary from $1 to $5. Japan stations, if they say $1, they mean $1, because I've sent them 2 or 3, just being generous, and they'll send the change back, which is great, you know. So, but others are demanding $5 now for a QSO confirmation. It's pretty steep. So the obligation of QSLing cuts both ways to get a confirmation, but the DX station usually determines the method, because you think about it, they just have so many more requests, and they're having to foot the bill for printing of cards and massive mail fees and that kind of thing. So follow the QSL's, the station's QSL instructions on QRZ. They will spell out how to QSL them. And then receiving the cards, don't forget to log that you've received it and also archive it. I use a shoebox. So the Fox and Hound mode, how are we doing on time? You're okay? Fox and Hound mode, WSJTX software has a setting specifically for de-expeditions called Fox and Hound. Fox is the DX station, Hounds are those chasing it. And so to make these setting changes, you go to the General tab, under Settings, General tab, and set double click to transmit. Some people leave that set all the time. I don't like to, because I like to put a station over in the receive box window and just monitor it. I don't want to contact it. I just want to get it over there so I can watch it and see its signal changes and when is a good time to contact it. But when you go to Fox and Hound, you need to set that so that when you double click their call, it puts it in the band box and actually enables the transmit button. And then on the radio tab, you set that to split operation. And each radio is going to be different. There's going to be choices there. And then advanced tab, you set to hound mode. So it looks like this. So I don't know if you can see this very well or not. So there's the settings box and the general tab. And then down here is the double click tab on the call sets transmit enable. And then here's the radio tab, and under split operations, on the IC 7100, I have to set it on rig. When I was using the Kenwood 480, I had to set it with a signal link. I had to set it on fake it. So it just depends on your radio setup. And then under advanced, you can see here the special operating activity, and they have Fox and Hound. You want to make sure it's clicked on Hound. So this is my first time using Fox and Hound here. I did a screen capture of it. And it was, I think, a February afternoon, April. April afternoon, and I got on the band and I saw two African stations. I've forgotten which is which, TR and TT. One's Chad and one's Gabon. Which is which?
TT's Chad.
TT is Chad, okay. And so I had never worked FT or Fox and Hound before, so I called Paul Dixon. And he was available. He picked up the phone and he said, "Yeah, I can walk you through it here." I said, "What do I do?" He told me how to make those settings. He also told me that when you're calling, you want to, this guy is calling at a low frequency. He's down around 281, which on the graph would be way down here. When you're in Fox and Hound mode, you generally have to be above 1,000 hertz for him to hear you, because this other area is going to be where he puts callers that he chooses. He will actually move where you're transmitting from down to his frequency and finish the contact. So that's kind of cool. That's why the transmit enable button has to be checked. And so I got confused on this, I think, being my first time. And you can see I call up there, KI5DJP, that was my first call sign. And I call to TR8, and he comes back, and I think I may have called him several times up above. You don't see this, but, and he comes back -10. And I give him a reply signal of +7. And then he gives me RR73. And then I jump back in and give him the signal report again as though I didn't receive it. So I must have been doing this manually. And then, oh no, different call. So he gives me RR73, and then the TT8 station comes back in and gives me a report, initial report. So I think what happened was when I saw that, I came back with a report reply, which I thought was to TR8, but it was to a different station, TT8. But anyway, I finished that contact. He gives me RR73 again, And then I start working the TT station and we complete that contact. So it was kind of a confusing situation, having never done it before and not understanding how everything works so smoothly when you do it right. But that was, we were on the phone with Paul and talking through this, and I called once or twice to the station, and I said, okay, I transmitted, and I called, nothing's happening, I don't see anything. A minute or two passed, he said, hit him again, hit him again. And so I hit him 3 or 4 times, and then he finally came back to me. But that, I'll always remember that, getting Paul to help and him helping me get those 2 contacts. So let's look at software and tools. Software I use with WSJTX, it's Logbook of the World, an internet clock sync. I started out using Dimension 4, which is old antiquated software, but it worked until Windows finally upgraded and killed it. And then I switched to NetTime because it's easy. WSJTX doesn't really recommend NetTime because of the format that it uses to adjust the time clock. It has its own software that it prefers, but I tried installing it a couple times, and I never was sure I installed it right. I didn't get any feedback from it on that it was doing what it was supposed to do, so I went to NetTime, and that works. JT Alert, for the first year while I made DX contacts, I had to look them up manually, the call signs, the prefixes, to know who I was chasing and calling. And that became a pain. But after about a year, I found JT Alert, and I installed that, and it works on top of WSJTX. And I'll show you a screen capture of it, but it's really cool. It alerts you to visually and with a sound when a new station that you need pops up. DX Atlas. I got to take time to show you this program just a little bit. So this is really cool. So this is set up to show the CQ zones for all the countries in the world. You can see over here, there's my antenna right there, W5. And so down here's Mexico. And if you put your cursor over it, it pops up and tells you what country it is. Wherever you put your cursor, well, it may not allow me to do it in here. But one of the things I like about it is this graphic representation of the dark side, light side of the globe, and then the gray zone. As most of you know, the gray zone is really important for DXing. It's about a 10 to 20 minute period of time every day when the sun transitions here from nighttime to daytime. And propagation is really good in that little zone for just about 10 or 15 minutes. I was on the bands just listening to CW the other night, and I picked up a station in, it was Egypt, SU, a station I hadn't ever seen before, right here. So, and it was about like this, where the gray line was just about to get to him, and he was really strong, and I called to him a couple times, and he came back, but he couldn't pick up my call signal. And then I went outside and I changed the direction of my antenna. I came back inside and his signal faded. So it was just that brief. One plus about having a rotor, a power rotor inside your house with a button you can push, and you don't have to run outside and waste time changing a beam. So there's the globe. Here's a rectangle. This is grid squares. So this will show you grids, and you can mark those as worked, and you can annotate them with a station you worked. Just really cool. And then this is another graphic representation of the gray line and the light side, dark side of the globe. But those two features right there are, in my mind, worth it. Here we go. So if you have a beam and you want to know where your bearing is, right there it is. So you put it on the station about where you think he is, and right here it's 14 degrees from my location. 7,672 miles, or long path, and go opposite 180 degrees, and there's my long path setting and how many miles it is. So long path during, I think I was hearing that Egyptian station long path because I had it pointing towards Alaska, so it wasn't that far off of being towards the long shot at Egypt through Asia. Anyway, I like that program. It's a standalone program. It works with DX Suite, and I think it's about $30 for the package. Okay, let's get back to where I was. Right there's where I was. So spotting tools that are good to use these are all on your URL list that I handed out. DXscape, which is just a brief 20, you can set it for 25 spots, the most recent 25 spots, and it updates every minute. So that's real handy. DXheat shows you a diagram, a graphic representation of the A indexes and the K indexes and what kind of geomagnetic interference you might be getting to propagation. And then Ham Alert, which is where you can go and you can set up alerts to come to your email or to your phone when the station that you need pops up in this spot somewhere. Anyway, these are a bunch more tools listed on your handout sheet there. One thing I will say about PSK Reporter, it's a cool tool, but I found out that I went to their webpage and I looked, and it lists the call signs on the spots on the send and receive. And I saw my call sign in there on several spots, and I said, how am I getting on that report? I haven't even posted any spots or anything. And what happens is if you click this checkbox right here, enable PSK Reporter spotting, as soon as you put the call sign over here in the band activity window over here to the RX frequency window, it registers that as a spot. So what that's reporting is not necessarily a QSO. It's only that someone has heard that station. So if you see a spot for a station and just one spot for that station, chances are you're not going to have any success chasing that station because it may not even be a QSO, just someone heard him one time. But if you see him pop up again and again and again from several different hams in different areas, then you know, well, people are working him pretty regular. These are just some screenshot examples of the software package itself. So this is what it looks like. Here's your frequency that you've chosen over here, 17 meters, 18108, or 100 in FT8 mode. Your time. Over here is they've changed this box recently, but it gives the sequence. You used to click on these little tabs here and it would show the sequence that you could send. But as the as the calls propagate, they propagate over here in the band activity window, and then you can select them and put them over here in the RX frequency window, and here's where you actually see you working them. It'll show your call to them and their reply to you. So there's a bunch of calls there, and here's a couple. I was following the V5 station, Belize, and the SM station, which is from Sweden, was close enough to his frequency. It also picked him up and put him in there. And this is the widescreen graph, so that's what it looks like. And this is pretty low activity right here. I mean, everyone's spread out. There's not a lot of calls going on the offset frequency. But when it's busy, that thing will be lit up orange with strong signals from left to right and up and down. So that's kind of the movement, how it progresses, how the call box populates, and how the graph comes down. You can kind of mesmerizing. So calling CQ, what happens a lot is when you throw out your call sign, CQ, KI5DJP, you may get a bunch of calls at the same time. And so how do you work those? Well, you can work them as you receive them. And if it's not too busy, you can, where your window disappears on you, and you don't have to go and hunt for them backwards in the call list, then you can work them as you receive them. Otherwise, if you start getting a lot of activity, you're just going to have to work the last call next. So as you finish a call, whatever the next call is that shows up on your window, work him. And then those people the people that called before will have to keep calling and catch a window where they can catch you. So this is DX calling CQ. So here's the, V5 was Namibia. This is V3, Belize. And I never can remember why or how they figured out these call prefixes, because you've got both V's, one a Caribbean station, one an African station. It sounds like they won the lottery where people wanted a V call, and so they just pulled them out of a hat, irrespective of where they were on the globe. So this is JT Alert add-on, and you can see Easter Island, CE0YHO pops up here, and he was on my list of new stations I needed. So here's a good clean call. I call J69DS, that's St. Lucia, and he comes back J69DS minus 10. I give him an R plus 4. He gives me a RR73. I give him a 73, and the call is logged and done. If you can set this to automatically log, so that log box pops up as soon as you get to 73, and you can just enter your power mode or the amount of power you used for the call, and then it's entered. So this is an incomplete call, a good example of an incomplete call. This was Saudi Arabia, HZ, and I saw him working, and he had a pretty, let's see, what was his signal? No, he's down in the teens, so minus 12, minus 15 or so. That's pretty weak. So, but I did get a return call from him of minus 17. I sent him a reply report of minus 15, minus 15, minus 15, minus 15, minus 15, and he never came back. So that little bit of peak propagation, I got a reply from him. He heard me and he came back, but that was it.
Does the software determine the signal strength for the report?
Yeah, I mean, it's a relative, I guess it's a relative thing, isn't it, Mark? So,
So it's not something you determine?
no.
Okay.
It's
Oh.
relative to your local received noise floor.
My noise
Yeah,
floor, which
so
is,
if you're in a real noisy place, you may not get the same report as somebody that was in a real quiet, rural area.
You know, signal to noise ratio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's your local noise.
Now, this was a fumbled call, but we recovered. So this was, I was working one morning and I saw a P2 pop up, and that's Papua New Guinea. I needed him. You can, I also needed VK7 over here at the same time, but I worked the Papua New Guinea station. So I send him he comes back with a -7. I send him an R5. He didn't get it, so he sends an R7 again. I send him 2 R5s, and then he calls another guy. And I go, but then he comes back, RRR, gotcha. And I must have sent this manually, RR73, because usually the software would just send a 73. So that was fumbled on my part, but he got it, and he's acknowledged with a 73. And most importantly, I was in his log. Now here's a hopeless call. This is FR, this is Reunion Island out in the Indian Ocean, past Madagascar. Let's see, what's his signal? -24, -18, so there's not much hope there. But I sent him some calls, and he's working AA7, which is West Coast, and no hope of catching that one. This was a distracted call, so this is VU, India, and I was calling him earlier, way up there. He comes back to me, gives me a -18, and I send him an R+4, and this is pretty typical of working DX. The signal that you get may be really strong, like -4 or 10, or I'm sorry, +4 or 10. And your signal to him may be 20 decibels or 30 decibels weaker. And so that's what was going on here. And so as he sends me that R4, then this German station calls me, DM2, and sends me a signal report. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to work the VU station. So he sends me back RR73, and then the German station tries again. I ignore him. I send the VU station an RR73 again, and he sends me a 73. So you would have thought getting an RR73 from him and a 73 from him, I would surely be in his log, but I didn't make his log. So I emailed him about a month later, and he said, sorry, I don't have you in the log. At that time, I didn't realize this. Jay pointed this out to me through some email exchanges that if you do a screen capture like this, you've got some proof that you made the call and it was completed, and you can email the guy the screen capture and see what he says. So that's another way to cover your bases.
Did you do that?
I did not. I picked up another VU station. So I think I've got 5 India stations now. So.
And all the important ones you screen capture, right?
I do now. I do now for sure. So, and that was, we just had a thing where we had a de-expedition to Monaco, and there were 2 stations working over there, and they got their logs fouled up. And they actually requested that hams send in a screenshot of their call if they had a QSO. And I did, and they came through with the confirmation on it. So I think Jay did the same thing, right?
Well, on my case, they had their contacts listed on club log, but they've really got things fouled up.
Yeah.
They're showing the QSO completed in club log, but it's not funneling down the LOTW. And I don't know what they've done, but there's a file in that program that they can strip from. And I just think we're dealing with some inexperienced operators, and
Sounds like
they'll
it.
eventually get it sorted out. But it is frustrating because in my case, when this happens, I usually spend a few bucks. Kathy does not. She gets the confirmation.
There you go. Well, this was a fox and hound call with a TO. I think that was St. Martin. TO is a old French assigned call sign that several of the Caribbean islands use. So for St. Martin's usually what, FS? Is that right? But this was a special DX call sign that they'd issued. And so I got on the queue, and that's what you do. Sometimes I'll call once and just let it ride and see what happens. Or if I don't hear anything back in a minute, I'll hit 2 or 3 times again, just like Paul told me to do. And he came back, R -2. And then this is what the Fox and Hound signature will often show. They'll answer 2 calls at the same time. So they're giving me my final RR73, but they're giving this guy his initial -2 report. And if you see that, you know pretty certain that they're working Fox and Hound. Now there's been some changes, some other software options coming up for DX stations. It's a multi-streaming thing where they can work Fox and Hound, or they can work a single caller, and you don't have to be above 1,000 hertz. You can be right next to them, and that's kind of hard to know when they're doing that. But if you see them working this with replying to 2 calls at the same time, that's pretty much a sure clue that they're working Fox and Hound. And so you should put it in Fox and Hound mode and work them that way. When you're working Fox and Hound mode, it excludes all the callers that you would normally hear from your screen. So all you're focused on is just the DX station. And they will, like I said, they will grab you from up above 1,000 hertz, and they will bring you down to where they are. They'll give it 1 or 2 tries to get your signal report, and then if they don't, they'll put you in purgatory, which what I mean is they'll move you up 300 or 400 hertz below 1,000, and they'll leave you calling there until you either time out or they finally hear your signal, and then they give you an RR73. So they're controlling the whole show, and it's kind of fascinating to watch. It's, dare I say it, robot call? That's a controversial topic, I think. I have to confess, I have called them, a DX station on Fox and Hound, and it's been a long time since I'd heard anything from them, and I said they're not going to come back to me, and I go in the kitchen and fix a cup of coffee or something and come back, and they've answered me and completed the call.
And it's logged.
And it's logged. So this is a fake call, or a pirate call. 5V, which is Togo, I think. Is that Africa? Yep. Yep. So I just got the one, I just sent him my call, and no signal report was ever exchanged. He just sent me an RR73. So that's kind of a suspect call right there. So I go to look him up, and he's in, the guy that had the call sign was in Germany, Peter, I think. So I emailed him and I said, I just worked this call sign that you had several years ago. And he said, sorry, it wasn't me, I'm not in the country. He said, it could be reassigned. So the call could have been reassigned to someone else. But I've checked Logbook of the World, check on the find a call, try to see if he's logged anything, and nothing. So I think he was a pirate, which happens from time to time. Here's a more obvious pirate. Does anyone see the pirate call in there? Can you read that at all? I'll highlight it here in a second. Down on the left side. Tango, yeah, Tango, Radio, 0, Lima, Lima, Troll. And you look him up in QRZ and there's no call sign issued to that call. So someone was having some fun that evening. So what's going on here? This will happen to you unless you have your P's and Q's in order. I'd worked for a long time, and I think what was happening was I was working lower power. And as I stepped up my power and started working more distant DX stations, I started getting this error message, this rig control error message. And it took me a long time to track it down. I thought it was software not up to date, because Windows updates, and it seems like every time they do a Windows update, then it throws this out of sync and they have to do an update. And then once you do the update for the software and Windows, then everything's back in sync and it starts working again. But this kept going on. And so I found a help page with WSJTX has a groups page where they post on io.com and one of the groups there, and they have people that monitor that and come back with answers to questions all the time. And I found some things that talked about RF in the shack, and they said it's coming into your computer. And so one of the easy fixes I read about was to take the digital cable that comes out of your radio into your USB port and loop it 3 or 4 times and then plug it back in. That seemed to help, but it wasn't consistent. And if I'd go away and leave it running for a long period of time, 30, 45 minutes, an hour or so, I'd come back and if I turn the power supply off and back on, well, if I just got the clean ding sound, then I knew I didn't have any RF. But if I heard a stutter, like ding, then something was going on and I would get this pop-up message. So what finally fixed it, well, I got a new antenna, a hex beam, and it came with a 1-to-1 balun on the hex beam, made out of ferrite beads. So it's about this long, and it just attaches in line with the coax cable. And once I put that on, that stopped. So if you're getting, what causes RF from the antenna? Is it? I noticed it maybe particularly worse on windy days. Is that wind going over the wires and whatever? I don't know. But if you're getting that, error message, then it may be you've got some RF to deal with. This was a fun pickup. I'd been after, this is Tom, not in Magnolia, but Tom in Mongolia. And the JV station. And I picked him up on 15 meters. And I'd been after JT1, Charlie Oscar, and I had him on a couple of bands, but the problem was the U.S. Postal Service had restrictions into Mongolia and from Mongolia, and so there was no mail delivery going, and it went on for months and months and months, and it may still be in effect, I'm not sure. But I sent him a QSL, JT1CO, but it came back. It was returned by the USPS. So, and he wasn't doing Logbook of the World confirms for that call that I contacted him under. He had a CW call that he would do Logbook of the World confirms for. But I picked up this guy, and I did get an easy confirm from him. He has I don't know if it's his son that's in Berkeley, California, or he comes back and forth or whatever, but he has a U.S. postal address that you send the QSL card to, and it came back in a matter of 2 weeks. So that was a good deal. And I don't think I had to send him any money. So unintended pileup. Sometimes when you call CQ, this is what happens. You get a bunch of stations. It happens frequently with European stations, but actually I was getting a 6 report from YB, Indonesia. And then this was the log that was generated on that little streak. I had 12 calls. Half of them were DX. So I had 2 Russian stations, and then 2 Indonesian stations, YB and YE, and Canada, and then several U.S. stations. So that was a fun string, and that streak went from, there's a time on there, 23:53 to, no, this must have been over different days or something. Anyway, that's the log report. That's an ADI file that WSJTX generates. And then you can take this file and import it into your logging program and then upload it to Logbook of the World. I've heard some reports that if you let this get too full, this little file, that it starts getting problems with corruption. So keep them short. Update them pretty often. I do mine after every radio session, and then clear it out. When you erase the calls, don't erase this EOH up there in the brackets. Leave that, because. Okay, we're done. This is a Caribbean call guide that I gave you. It was just a handout that had the call sheets, kind of the countries, the Caribbean countries organized, and that was a pursuit that I enjoyed. Seemed like the call signs were all over the place for the Caribbean stations, so I needed some kind of organization for them. Thank you so much. Enjoyed it. If you have questions, I'll be around.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
When you click on a station call in CQ, are you supposed to match your transmit frequency to their frequency?
Well, if you're calling DX, it's good to work split. So you put those little red brackets that shows the transmit position, you put it at a different frequency, and I usually try to pick a clear spot, if you can find one, where there's no interference with any other stations, and call from, if you're on the upper bands, I try to keep it within 300 or 400 hertz. If you're down in 20 meters or 80 meters, sometimes I'm up at 2,500 hertz, and the station I'm working is down at 200 and 300 hertz, and he'll hear me just fine. But it seems like as you further up in the bands you go, the closer you have to get to him. Okay? Anything else?
Another thing I was gonna mention too is you can sync the time on your PC anytime you want by just right-clicking on the date and time prompt in the lower portion of the Windows desktop. And that brings up a pop-up window and select adjust date and time. There's a little option there to sync.
There's some, the manual for WSJTX says it's not as precise or as accurate, and it doesn't narrow it down as tight as it should be. So that works, but it's probably better to use a program to do it.
Scott, the Bella Vista Radio Club would like to present this certificate of appreciation for your outstanding presentation at our meeting on August 4th, 2022 on working DX with FT4 and FT8. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you so much.